Check out the latest footwear innovation from Adidas, the Adizero Adios Pro 2, which features carbon fiber energy rods that are both lightweight and precisely tuned for a more anatomical transition. Everything from the ultra-light polyester upper to the re-sculpted midsole and the reinvented outsoles are designed for speed. Visit adidas.com to learn more today.
A lot of us are looking for ways to start our day feeling more joy and appreciation. And while some of us write gratitude lists or do yoga, others pour themselves a bowl of their favorite cereal, Honey Nut Cheerios. Because not only are Honey Nut Cheerios delicious, they can help lower cholesterol as part of a heart-healthy diet. So maybe the secret to a great mood all day is a little yoga, then writing your gratitude list over a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios. Learn more about a heart-healthy lifestyle at Cheerios.com.
Hey, and welcome to the Hypothalamic Amenorrhea podcast, an adulting advice podcast production. I'm Dani Sheriff, and this is the place to come if you care about getting your period regularly. This podcast aims to educate, inform, and keep you motivated on your period and HA recovery track. Let's dive in. And quick disclaimer, guys, I am not a doctor, and this content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. Always seek the advice of your physician. Hey everyone, welcome to the Hypothalamic Amenorrhea podcast. It is me, your host, Dani, and I'm joined today by Mollie Birney.
Hi guys.
Did I say your last name right?
You absolutely did.
And I always intro the people, and then in the middle of the intro, I'm like, I forgot to check the name pronunciation.
I had a moment of like, oh, how's this going to go? And it sounds like it went okay.
Hilarious. I do feel like one of my many skills is pronouncing names.
That really is a skill. It really is, because it just ingratiates people to you immediately if you're able to do it right.
Yeah, but I never get my name said right. So I always get like some like Sheriff, Sharif, or something like that. So I get it. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Mollie is going to talk to us today from two perspectives, which is one, her own story of HA and struggling, which we're all here for. We're all pumped to hear about it. Mm-hmm. And also from a perspective of working with many women with many different issues, but that all intersect somewhere typically with having HA. So she's just obviously got like a wealth of experience to just share with us today. So Mollie, welcome. Tell us about you and what you do exactly, and just tell me your story.
Sure. Well, certainly not all my clients have HA, but it is something that I tend to notice with those that I work with that are struggling with any disordered eating. It tends to be more common than not, frankly. So I'm a clinical life coach. That's my background. I'm a former therapist who decided, the therapeutic conversation is great, but I like to be a little bit more playful and irreverent and heavy-handed when necessary and collaborative with my clients. So a coaching conversation was certainly the better direction for me. And I happen to have a specialization in working with people with disordered eating and chronic dieting and people who have had really complicated and even compulsive relationships with exercise. So which is certainly part of my own story, as you might have guessed, given the topic. So I work with a lot of clients who are struggling with body image issues to any degree. And it's not uncommon to see hypothalamic amenorrhea show up as a talking point, and is one that really requires a totally different degree of focus, because we're not just dealing with the psycho-emotional anymore. We are now dealing with the physical repercussions of a belief system, which is usually based in fear and control and things like that. That was a very vague answer to your question here, but
it makes no sense. It's funny. I was chatting in an email to a girl who reached out to me this morning and was like, here is my situation. I have an ED and I have no one to support me, and I've tried working with a dietitian, and I just like need the next person to go to. And in my head I was kind of like, yeah, well, you need this like person who understands your world, that can also talk to you a little bit from, like can specialize in what you're going through. Absolutely. So that kind of sounds like a good application for that person.
Well, feel free to center my way. And what I do love about coaching, and this is distinct from therapy, but as a therapist, I'm drawing on my body of experience, my body of academic knowledge and therapeutic instincts. But as a coach, I'm drawing on a whole body of experience where I get to share, like, here's the blood that I left on the field, and here's my own experience with this. And I find that, especially around disordered eating, chronic dieting, and frankly, compulsive behavior around exercise, it's really helpful for people to have heard exactly the play-by-play of what I went through. That I'm just as bananas historically, and I really understand the nuances and, man, the mental gymnastics we put ourselves through in order to get this stuff. So, and coaching can be the right conversation.
Awesome. Well, speaking of, I would love to hear about how bananas you are. What happened?
Category. What are we talking about here? Well, let's see. I'll start by saying I'm 35 now. I've been in recovery from some gnarly bulimia for about 14 years, so that is long behind me. But truly, recovery didn't start until I stopped throwing up, and then beginning to see, oh my gosh, this actually extends beyond just throwing up and just being neurotic about calories and that sort of thing. So I got abstinent from my eating disorder when I was 22 or so. Is that the math? I can't even math right now. Forgive me.
You don't even ask me at all.
Good.
That kind of a question.
But what was always sort of sneaking in the background was like, yeah, I'm not bulimic, but I'm going to be a little compulsive with exercise. Okay. Right. And was always honest with my treatment team at the time, that I was working with. And, as I got older and my recovery matured, and then I eventually went for a master's in clinical psych, and, my recovery was certainly solid, but there was always this kind of exercise stuff going on in the background where, like, I don't want to take off days, or I wanted to lift heavier. And so naturally, when I fell into amateur boxing, of all things, it happened to align really well with the compulsive exercise part of me, because there's this intense training protocol. And with the amateur team that I was invited to train with, this was like a 6-day-a-week ordeal. And on the 7th day, it was not time to rest. It was time to just go for a gentle 5-mile run or something, which for me was always insane. I hate running. Oh, by the way, I should ask, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, good to know, because I kind of can't fucking help myself.
I know. I can't, even if I tried, I wouldn't be able to not.
I know. It's hopeless. So I fucking hate running. So even the 5-mile run was not a gentle 5-mile run for me. It was an experience of martyrdom. So really intense training schedule. And it was compounded by the fact that because I'm boxing, because I'm actually in combat here, and sure, there's gear on, but I'm still getting hit in the head pretty regularly, that my fitness is directly impacting how injured I'm getting. So if I have better cardiovascular health, if I have more endurance, if I have more strength, I'm less likely to get hit. So they're justifying, oh, I need to go lift more, I need to go train harder so that I don't get hit. It became this whole thing to just justify the compulsive exercise, really. And this was in recovery. And the reason I say this is in recovery is because I was still feeding myself. I was still really conscious of my own psycho-emotional well-being. I was also just watching this disordered element play out in this other field. And the other thing is, I was training with guys, which meant I was getting hit a lot, and I was getting hit a lot harder than, frankly, was necessary, I think, in for anyone who was training to fight. And that even when I was training for fights and had to make a particular weight for fights, I did that in a really, frankly, sober, for lack of a better word, sober way. That I wasn't doing that with exercise. I wasn't doing that with food. I was just being as careful as I could to maintain the weight that I needed to maintain to fight, but not in any way that had to look like purging or restricting or anything like that. It was really the exercise. And there was a sense in my body that I got to have more muscle and more definition and more strength as I moved through the world. So there was an argument to be made that although the boxing ate my life time-wise, and certainly commanded me in terms of how I had to spend my time and with exercise, I loved how I felt in my body as a result. I loved the experience of boxing. I loved a lot of what I was learning. I just was also aware this couldn't possibly be sustainable, right? And in fact, it was not, because several years later, my husband and I, or my now husband and I, were talking about having kids, and I just decided to stop boxing because that was enough concussions and enough getting hit in the head. But I was still training to that capacity. I was still like training with the same frequency as though I was going to fight. So we started talking about trying to get pregnant. I went off the pill and was waiting for a period, and continued to wait for a period, and more anticipation, but no period. So that was the first kind of stunning indication of, oh, is something wrong here? I didn't even know something was wrong at the time. I went to go see my OBGYN, and she had said very bluntly, oh, no, your body thinks you're at war right now, which would make sense given how much I had been getting hit and how much I was lifting and how much stress and intensity.
For you, it was a very literal sense of like, it's not safe to have a baby.
Exactly. I was just flooded in cortisol constantly, and it literally was not safe to have a baby.
Yeah, getting punched.
Go ahead. Sorry.
You were getting punched and stuff.
Exactly. And of course, my response was like, okay, well, what if I just don't get hit? What if I can keep lifting really intensely? Okay, I'm stopping the boxing, but what if can I stay in the gym that frequently? So I tried to do it my way, naturally, being like, well, lifting light weights doesn't count, or, intense yoga class counts as rest, right? No, Mollie, none of those things count as rest. None of those things are restorative at all. So it was a lot of scrambling through the process of like just trying to bargain. It was like trying to bargain with the gods of athleticism. Like, what can I get away with that my body will start operating the way that it needs to, that I'll have a normal cycle, but I can still maintain the body and the level of fitness that I wanted. And I realized I had so much identity wrapped up in this idea of being someone who was fit. I had so much meaning and value wrapped up in the idea of being someone who could push herself to those levels, that I was terrified that if I stopped pushing myself, I was going to lose some part of myself. Like I was going to lose the capacity to operate with that much discipline or that much intensity. Or like I would lose it's like I would fall down into the couch of laziness forever. That was, I think, the fear. Because there was no concept of what moderation would look like. It was only either I'm going all the time or there's nothing. And so I was just terrified that was what it was going to look like perpetually.
A lot of people are really resonating with that. And it's like so many of the questions that people ask, if I put up like a little, what do you want to hear about question or something on Instagram, is just like dealing with not having exercise, or
right.
But with eating but not exercising.
Right.
It's just like one of the biggest fears that people have. And I so resonate when you said that if you stopped, you would lose a part of yourself. Yeah. That was a huge part of me too. It's like, who am I then?
Absolutely. And that's exactly the question that actually started to heal this process for me. Mm-hmm. That I began with, who the fuck am I if I can't do these things? And that had to alchemize into curiosity. Like, who the fuck am I if I can't do these things? I want to know.
Then you realize, like tell me what happened to you. But for me, it was scary, but then it was also like, oh, it's almost like I get to kind of like start my life again. If I was a different person, what would I do? And when you kind of look back on your exercise, and I'm sure you had many times like this too, because I also came from an athlete situation. Mm-hmm. You spend a lot of time like getting ready for training, thinking about like what else you could be doing if you didn't have to go to training. But I have to go to training, and it's almost like a physical, like if I'm on my way to training, like I'm already going.
Oh yeah, it's already going.
Yeah. So you sort of have these like fleeting fantasies about what life would be like without this crazy regime. Right. And now it's in front of you as a reality.
Right.
You basically are entering into the world of active recovery, I suppose. So what happens next?
That was the idea. But I had to find my curiosity around this. Mm-hmm. And I also had to ask myself this, did I did I want not exercising to work? Did I want to not exercise and prove that that was a ridiculous thing to do? Or did I want to not exercise and prove that that was a healing thing to do? Because there was a way I could approach this putting down the exercise and have a really shitty attitude and be a martyr about it and be like, no, I have to do this thing. And this means I'm going to be unhealthy. And this means I'm going to be unmotivated. And this doesn't mean, that I could fulfill on that slippery slope fear. Or I could decide that I wanted to work out. Like, I could decide, yeah, I'm terrified of this, and I'm going to do the best I can and rebuild my body and see what happens. That I don't actually want a life where I have to be a slave to the gym in the way that I was. Well, not that I didn't also enjoy the gym, but it can certainly be a complicated relationship. But that if I wanted my life to resemble, like to have room for a baby and my career and my husband and also some fitness, that fitness wasn't going to be able to come first. So I needed to build my life in a way where it was actually sustainable. So I had to want this to work out. And I really had to kind of get behind myself, because I can be someone who's in a tremendous amount of self-pity if I'm not being careful. I can certainly fall into my own martyrdom of like, my body betrayed me and I lost my period. Like, how about I betrayed my body and I ran into the ground and I abused it? So of course I lost my period. Of course. So that was really one of the big turning points. And I had to sit with the fear. I had to build a relationship with the fear of, who am I going to be when I lose some of this muscle? Who am I going to be when I allow my body to soften? That's what my doctor had said. She's just to let your body soften. And I was like, that is the dirtiest word you could possibly have told me. I was just so silently offended by it, and really not offended, but terrified.
Yeah.
Terrified.
Well, it's terrifying because everything you've heard up until that point is to harden up your body. Get a little harder. You're looking a little soft in a very negative way. Right.
That's exactly.
And then that doctor is like, hey, get soft. And you're like, what? And that's something a point that I would love to sit on for a minute. It's like a little nugget, which is that we get told this message so much that, harden up, lean out, blah, 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 that we don't even get like a minute to sit there and think, what is that actually asking me to do? As in, you're asking me to put my body through this really hard experience. And I almost could liken it to, someone telling you maybe how to parent your child and telling you to parent your child like in a very strict way. Right. And you should restrict your child of all of these things. You should make them do all of these activities so that they fit into this norm that I deem as being what is valuable. And you do not think for a second about how that's going to affect you. But if someone was telling you to do that to your child, you would be like, what?
We're being told by this media, like, this is how you parent your body. This is how you take care of your body. This is what's required. But we're not told about any of the repercussions of that potentially. We're not told about the hormonal imbalance or about the sleep deficit or about the neurological issues that show up as a result.
No. In fact, if you do what we say, you will be healthier.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's a really fucked up marketing enrollment plan that we've done since birth, really into our adolescent years of like, here's what's required of you to be a woman. Here's what's expected in order for your body to be of value in terms of all of it.
God, it's so true. There's so much pressure everywhere. Clothes are made and look a certain way and are deemed to look good if you're only a certain way. And
that's absolutely right. I'm looking up this Instagram post that I made a couple weeks ago, and there's a picture of myself and at 6 years old, which is like the most innocent photo of me I think I've ever seen. And it says, "Dear 6-year-old Mollie, fair warning, your value as a woman will be dependent on a delicately balanced formula of being attractive but not vain, being tough but not bitchy, and being ambitious without being off-putting. Please plan accordingly. Sincerely, the patriarchy." I realize that sounds a little like heavy-handed feminist, but that was the context that I grew up in, was my dad saying, you have to be physically fit, you have to be attractive, but don't be vain, don't be needy about it, which is for me, how I fell into athleticism. It was like the safe ground where that's where I could be vain about my body, but I wasn't going to look needy or too confident or whatever. So like all of these requirements of womanhood that were actually very counterindicated and very complicated and very nuanced. It's bananas.
It is bananas. Yes. It's very important that you figure out how to be effortlessly always gorgeous.
Right, right.
Yes, like that is oxymoron. Oh, okay,
Absolutely.
cool. So what was it that, was it your experience and your studies that kind of helped you do all of this reframing and come and be able to work through this so productively? Or are we skipping through some dark times here, or what's going on?
No, I certainly don't mean to imply that it was all smooth sailing. Like, look, yes, I'm a mental health professional and I have plenty of years in the field, but mental health professionals need their support as well. And so that's why I'm the first to admit I have a therapist, I have a coach, I have an incredible husband. He is also a therapist. And
Why is that always a thing?
it just is. We met in rehab a million years ago, so I don't know that it's the typical therapists, encountering each other, but that's a whole other podcast, I'm sure. But when I was in for an eating disorder, I ended up meeting him. He was in for various other substance recovery. But yeah, no, I have a killer support system. Of course, there were dark times in this. There were times when I hadn't been on the scale in years, where in recovery, in allowing myself to recover from hypothalamic amenorrhea, I was back on the scale in a pretty compulsive way, just in fear. And the best I could do was be in communication with my people about it and be like, hey, here's what I'm doing right now. I know this is kind of insane. I know this is probably not recommended. And I can't stop looking at the scale. Like I'm in a bit of a regressed place here where this is what feels important. Help me work with this. So I absolutely got support around this. Absolutely. Read a lot of books, got on my knees a lot. There were times when absolutely I'd be in child's pose in tears, in fear about what is this going to mean for me? And who am I going to be if I don't, this sounds so fucking trivial, but really, who am I going to be without abs? That was the fucking question that ended up, being so crushing. And in the next moment was like, hold on, you're trying to get pregnant with all of this. You realize you're not going to have abs while pregnant either, Mollie. Like, how much identity do you really want to construct around this really fleeting thing? So getting to have both tremendous amounts of judgment at that thought, who am I going to be without my abs? And then enough compassion, who am I going to be without my abs? That I have to have compassion for all of how much fear I must be feeling to be attached to a thought that's that ridiculous. How much of a foundation of identity must have been laid around my relationship to my abs at a young age in order for me to be like 30 years old on my knees crying about potentially losing them. Like there's a lot attached to that. And that's not to say that I'm not responsible for that as well, but I do have an eye on the patriarchy and the culture at large for how they contribute to that,
Yeah, well, you have to be always sort of on your guard about what is this message that this person telling me.
Right.
Because we need to be fighting off those messages all the time. So you kind of do have to keep an eye.
Exactly right.
Doing.
But that was that idea, like who am I going to be without my abs? I could decide that like I don't want to be okay without my abs. I have to find a way to make this work. I have to either sacrifice my body to have abs. Does that even fucking make sense? No. But I also decided I want to be someone who's okay if she doesn't have them. I want to be okay with that. And the only way I can be okay with that is to move forward into this unknown world where my body is going to have a little bit less cachet when I go out in the world, and have to be okay with that. And got to be curious about what's going to come as a result. How am I going to be met? Is it going to be exactly how I think it's going to be? Is it going to be less traumatic? Is it going to be differently traumatic? I had to bring my own curiosity rather than assuming I knew that I needed my body to be in a particular order in order for me to operate in the world. Because that just might not be true.
Yeah, a lot of women are experiencing the thought process that you're describing. I guess we all just have these irrational thoughts around like what is going to happen to our lives.
Right.
Like, are we going to just become nobody?
Right.
Are we going to we were once in the top percentile of successful women based on this criteria.
Yeah.
And now that I'm in the middle. What does this mean? And well, so you went through that, and the reality is you probably go through it still every day.
Ongoing process. And I say this to clients as well. Like, this is not something where you're going to wake up and you're going to be cured, because we're not inoculated against the information we're getting from society. This stuff gets triggered all the time. I just have a relationship with the thoughts. So I have those thoughts rather than those thoughts have me. I don't have to be a hostage to the body delusion here. I can just kind of observe, oh, right, there's some of that body noise. I'm familiar with that. Oh, really? Oh, what an interesting contribution. You're going to insult me this morning. Ah, all right. All right, good to know. Maybe put you on the back burner right now.
Yeah.
I can read them and engage with them.
The bit that you're describing right now, a lot of this podcast is kind of it's for people at all stages of recovery, but very much so for the people right at the stage you're talking about right now. Freaking out about the dialogue, the big changes maybe haven't happened yet, or they've happened, but you still don't have a period, that kind of situation. So what happened next, as in, how did your thought processes change? How did your body change? What things were becoming easier? What, anything unexpected, whatever tangents are most important to you?
Sure. I think one of the things that I noticed most immediately was that my sleep improved, which who knew, if you're not like overloading your nervous system with intensive weight training or boxing, that of course you'd be able to sleep better. It just hadn't been something that I'd quite put together. So yes, my body did soften. I didn't gain a ton of weight, which was surprising. I was expecting to, but it didn't happen. But the composition of my body absolutely changed. That required a lot of work. And it's arbitrary that the number on the scale didn't change that much. It was just trust me, the body composition did. The way I looked, the way I felt, the way I moved, all of that absolutely shifted. But I think in reading so many stories of women who were struggling with this, I realized that I could go the half-assed approach and be a year and a half.
Are you listening to this show hoping to get some golden nuggets to help you on your way to recovery? Well, great. I hope that you find them, because that is exactly what this show is for. But if you really want to take your recovery all the way, completely commit and get on track with your goals, whether they be finally feeling overall healthy, finally getting pregnant, or finally getting back to training, you'll want to join us inside of the HA Society. Not only is this the perfect community to ask questions and get your support and the accountability that you so often need during these uphill battles with body image and understanding nutrition and incorporating exercise, but it's also a hub of exclusive resources for HAs. All of the HA podcast episodes are released in advance and completely ad-free, so you can listen on the go to the raw, unedited versions uninterrupted. All of the one-on-one coaching calls, of which we have 2 a week in different time zones, are uploaded to our private podcast feed so that you can listen to events with practitioners and the past community calls as though they were bonus podcast episodes, because I know how much you love to listen to this kind of stuff. And in these calls, we cover requested topics like overcoming the weight gain fears, communicating with friends and family about our HA, diving into how HA works, and debunking the imposter syndrome that so many of us have around this diagnosis. There's also an entire resources section with lectures, workshops, and training from the past events that are hosted by experts like Sarah Liz King, Laura Lyons, Kaylee McDevitt, Holly Dunn, and many more. As a member, you also get direct access to myself and Coach Ashley in the DMs. So if you have personal questions or need individualized advice about your recovery, we're in there answering your questions in the DMs, as are all of our other members in the group who impress me week after week with how they show up for each other. It's incredible. It's like women are just all becoming mini coaches for each other. It's so good. The HA Society is really the place to be if you're going through recovery, no matter what stage you're at. Whether you have HA or you've got a few recovery periods, we have your back and we're all your new best friends. So come and meet us at thehasociety.com/join. That's thehasociety.com/join, and the link is in the show notes for you. Okay, on with the show.
half into trying to recover my period, still not having got my period, and feeling frustrated that my half-assed approach wasn't working. Or I could go all in. And based on my compulsive history, as you might have guessed, I am the all-in type. I gotta know that it's gonna work. I want to know that if I don't get my period back, at least I've thrown everything at the wall. That was really where I had to go. So what changed was largely that realization that I was doing some kind of half measures, being like, this doesn't count as working out, right? Or this is enough calories, right? Not so much. So no half measures. I had to go all in. That was a big part of it.
I get a lot of questions about when people say, I tried to go all in, but then like the calories weren't enough, so I had to up more. And the question I get is like, when do I get to stop upping them? And I don't know, you're free to answer that question however you want, like how you figured out you needed to eat more. We do say numbers on this podcast. We just like tell people in advance. And the reason for that is because a few of us were the only times we had heard examples of what low calorie is in like, I don't know, just other sources of that information. And it would always be presented as like 1,200 calories. And so there was a lot of comparison between like, well, I wasn't eating that low.
Yeah.
So I must have been eating enough. And so that's where sometimes I find a problem with not saying the numbers, because quite consistently the numbers are, they're pretty much the same for everyone when we say it out loud. So it's like not really that scary, but it's helpful to say the numbers. It's totally up to you. Yeah. But yes, what did like increasing your food look like and stuff?
Yeah, no, I had to increase to like 23 to 2,500 calories a day or so. That's what it had to look like. And I was eating, I wasn't paying attention to really how much I was eating before, because thankfully, you know, if I had not been in eating disorder recovery, this could have been really a dangerous experience, because there could have been restriction, there could have been purging, there could have been all of that. But that was not simultaneously part of the story, thank God. So I think I was probably eating that much, like the 23 to 25, maybe more like 2,000 a day. When I was training, it must have been actually more than that. Now that I'm thinking about how much I was actually burning
while you were training, or
yeah. No, it must have been more than that when I was training. But this is what I'm saying, is that I wasn't closely watching the numbers when I was training. It was when I stopped training that I was like, oh, now I have to be neurotic about this, right? But no, it was when I knew that I had to up the amount of food that I was eating, when I realized I was thinking about food more often. That it was just the thought, and then I could actually trust that my body was asking for food via fantasy. Now, that was something that I had to discredit previously. That wasn't something that I had faith in before. I was like, oh, I can't trust my brain. It's thinking about ice cream because, I don't know, because my brain's stupid. And I just needed to kind of recognize that I could trust that if it was introducing a fantasy of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's because I probably needed some fucking fat and carbs and some sugar, and go for it. That was actually like an evolutionary idea that this fantasy was going to bring me to the food that my body actually wanted. So that was an indication of intelligence, not of some fantasy I should be ignoring. So that was how I really recognized that I needed to increase the food.
Yeah, because I love this point. When you stop restricting and go a while where you eat what you want to eat when you want to eat it, there is a day and night difference between full, satiated, and not even interested in food. Absolutely. And thinking about food. But when you live in a restricted state, which can include thinking you're eating enough and training a lot, so you're just still hungry anyways, you just think there's no way I'll never be like this. Like if I go all in or whatevs, I'm going to just eat forever because I noticed that that's what my brain does. No, it's a total
Absolutely. And when I work with clients around the concept of self-compassion, whether they're disordered eating clients or clients just working on anxiety relationships or life transitions, the issue of compassion is dealt with in exactly the same way as the issue with trusting your body with eating. That there's a fear, if I'm compassionate with myself, that it's going to be this slippery slope, and then I'm just going to be compassionate and lazy all over the place and let things go and let myself off the hook. I'm like, that's not compassion. that's not intuitive eating. Like compassion requires our awareness of the process. If we're actually compassionate with ourselves, it's going to include some discipline. And it's the same idea with the intuitive eating, that if we allow ourselves to lean towards intuitive eating, that there's going to be a natural, discipline is not the right word here, but a natural shut-off point. If we're actually in tune with this, our body is going to say, okay, that's enough honey bunches of oats, Mollie. You can probably put that away now. Like, there will be a point in which your body communicates that to you. We've just got to be listening. Intuitive eating doesn't work without listening, in the same way that compassion doesn't work without our listening to our own intuition about when it's time to hold ourselves accountable again.
It kind of reminds me of the mechanism of palate fatigue, and how if you've ever experienced, maybe say you go to McDonald's and you get fries and you get a Coke, and you are eating your fries, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I like want a sip of my Coke.
Right.
The fries are like salty and fatty, and the Coke is sweet and cold. And so those two together allow you to feed the cycle. If you just ate chips and you sat there and you didn't have anything to break it up, you would much quicker become done with the chips.
Right.
Because and it's probably subconscious in a way that we're like eating and then we're like, oh, I could use a sip of my Coke. There's a reason for that. You're getting sick of the chips. You want to have a different flavor, a different stimulus. You take that sip and now you're ready to have the chips again.
Absolutely. And look, I'm all for fast food and fun food and all of that. And I know that stuff is also engineered to have as palate fatigue is the phrase you used, right? Have as long a duration before palate fatigue as possible. Like, it's engineered for us to not get tired of that shit. So, I'm all for eating those foods in as much as our body is asking for them. And I also know that there is quicker palate fatigue, or more natural process to palate fatigue with less processed food. So that was another part of the hypothalamic amenorrhea recovery for me, was going, all right, I wonder if my body can listen to its cues better with less processed food. Now, granted, ice cream and processed food was absolutely part of my process, still is to this day. I think it's also worth noting that the body tends to have a clearer response to less processed food.
Totally. I definitely don't subscribe to like eating junk. Like, I love nutrition. I love the science and the facts around how food impacts your body and all of that stuff. Yeah. And I don't just see it as energy in, energy out. What this whole process is for so many people is opening their world up to the fact they are now, yes, you are able to eat those foods. You can eat those foods. Yeah. But it is so fascinating when you learn about, like, well, if I do choose to eat that, it has no nutritional value for me at all. And so you just start to move towards foods that are better for you. And then you really start to experience this natural fullness and hunger cues. You experience it, more naturally.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And these are all my favorite side tangents. So.
No, that's great. I think it's important. And frankly, in any sort of eating disorder recovery or chronic diet recovering conversation, there's going to be some like treading lightly around specific food topics and things like that. So I know
it's like there's always that disclaimer, and everyone, y'all can all do you.
Absolutely. So really, I had to do a full 6 months go all in. And it was in the 6 months all in that eventually I got my period back, and we got to start to try and have the baby that you might be hearing wailing outside this door at the moment, actually. So forgive me, guys, if you can hear my darling 3-month-old Wesley losing his shit out there as he tantrums. So I'm obviously you can hear the happy ending here. But boy, was it one hell of a process, and humbling too. Like, here I was thinking that I had a relationship with exercise, when in fact I was a hostage. This was a hostage situation. I didn't have the freedom to choose to not go because the fear of not going was too overpowering. Yeah. And so getting to reclaim that and to have a different relationship to it now. Now, granted, now that we're going through COVID and quarantine and the gyms are closed, I am climbing the walls. Like, it is really difficult to not be able to go back. But I noticed this interesting instinct that I was like, oh man, after I'm done breastfeeding, then I can go back and lift heavy, and I don't have to worry so much about getting all the calories for the breast milk. And I like, really, it was as though I had the thought, after I'm done breastfeeding, I can go back to running my body into the ground, right? Like, that was the instinct. And I had to catch that thought and laugh at it, and then immediately call a friend of mine and tell her about it, just for the accountability, going like, okay, here's the gem that my brain just came up with. I got to drop this on you. This much recovery and a clinician in the field, and this is the thought that my brain had. So this is an ongoing process, and the more we can be in communication about it, the less shame there's going to be, the more of a community we can build among the other women who are also struggling with this, and we can start to normalize this, because this is a problem that is born of our relationship with our bodies. This isn't just another problem, like just another women's problem. This is another women's problem that's happens as a result of the information that we're getting about ourselves from a young age. That this could be avoided if we were not told what our bodies needed to look like. We're not naturally addicted to the gym just because exercise feels good. We're addicted to the gym because of the information and validation we get about ourselves, because we're going, because we're training our bodies into being something, because we're disciplined badasses who can override our body's cues. That's what we're being validated for.
Sentence that comes to my mind that I hear all of the time from women, mostly women, is oh, I'm going to the gym this morning so that I can eat at this restaurant tonight.
Right. Because there is so much to be potentially lost by not going to the gym and going to that restaurant. There's so much identity. There's so much value that could potentially be lost. That's the belief.
I fully resonate. Like, even today, your immediate response, everyone listening, if this is not you, DM me. I want to know who you are. Like, immediate thought is to mitigate whatever quote unquote damage is being done later in the day. Whether it's like because you want to lose weight, or just you're an athlete and you want to like not impact your gains in performance, or whatever your reason is,
right?
We're always trying to mitigate damage to it.
Exactly. Which means like that we're living in this perpetually damage control place. Like, we're trying to get back to zero all the time. What if that whole barometer, just throw that out the window? What about how we feel? What about like invented health? The idea of being able to determine our health based on how we're actually feeling in our bodies on any given moment, based on the regularities of our cycle, based on our energy and sleep patterns and all of that.
So that's a really great question. What post-recovery did you notice about yourself that was like, oh, this is health? How are you feeling? Was there any surprises that you were just like, oh, wow, I thought I was healthy, but I was missing this piece?
I think when it wasn't actually until my period came back and I started to notice week by week with where I was in my cycle, how my hunger and fullness fluctuated as a result of whether I was ovulating or whether I was actively menstruating or things like that. That being able to be in tune with my body that much, that felt like a whole new paradigm of health to me. And that, granted, didn't happen until after I got my period back. But that was a huge realization, like, oh, my body would have been, or rather, years ago when I was off the pill and just having my period regularly, my body was giving me this information that I decided I didn't want, I didn't need to tune into, wasn't valuable to me. I just overrode it. That health is the ability to understand and interpret the signals that my body is giving me. And for my body to actually provide those signals, I have to provide it the calories that it needs to be able to do that. So like that information, understanding of that, for me, that's what health is.
Nice. Yeah. When you have HA, those signals literally are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You're like, oh, mucus.
Right.
Oh, like random acne breakouts around the same time every month.
Yeah, how curious. But we're not looking for it. Like we're not actually trusting that our bodies are trying to communicate with us. Right. We're just there trying to override everything and to manage it with our hypomanic Western or ideal. It's really neurotic.
If it wasn't called hypothalamic amenorrhea, I feel like it would just be called like menstruation override. Psychosis or something like that.
Yeah. Or compulsive women needing to be in control. That kind of pathologizes us, and I don't mean to do that.
That's true.
Yeah, but we're
That's true. I definitely just feel like so many women resonate when they hear, themselves in the stories, though. They just,
yeah.
we're all pretty objective about the fact that, uh, we want things to be a certain way, and we want to be able to control, and we want to be able to like, this is quite a theme. And that's the importance of having this podcast and this conversation. You're not alone, and other women are also questioning the same things as you and trying to achieve the same thing as you.
Yeah.
And you're not, I think, like, one of the biggest things is you're not a unique butterfly snowflake, and you're not going to be the one person that can't get their period back
Right.
because of XYZ. And
Right.
that's really what this is all about.
Of course. So if I can offer some thoughts to those who are actively really struggling with this stuff, and whether you're in the part of the process of like, do I want to give up exercise? Do I want to give up the calorie restriction? How seriously do I want to take this? Whether you're in that kind of pre-contemplative place, or whether you're fully in it and being like, is this worth it? How do I do this? I think the question that I would want to pose to you is, what are you going to lose? What do you have to lose here? That's the first question. And the second part is, what aren't people allowed to think about you? What aren't they allowed to think? For me, they're not allowed to think I'm lazy. They're not allowed to think I'm undisciplined. They're not allowed to think I'm
My God, yes.
indulgent. Those were some of mine, at least. And I had to do, and this is the work that I do with my clients, a lot of work around being able to dismantle those identities so that people are allowed to think that I'm lazy. That doesn't mean I'm lazy, but I have to have the freedom for people to potentially have that thought about me. I have to risk someone thinking I'm out of shape and lumpy, or whatever my greatest fear is that happens to be it. I have to have room for that. I have to include that. Now, the interesting thing is, often when we make room for people to have those thoughts about us, it's actually very rare that they ever have those thoughts.
Yeah.
But we have to do that work within ourselves to be able to invite that possibility, to be able to invite that reality, so that otherwise it's like, it's not like I don't have discipline. Discipline has me. I have to make sure that there's a little bit more, a little more oxygen around that conversation, a little more freedom.
I had those thoughts too. It was very much like, but other people aren't going to understand that this is intentional, and that there's a goal behind this. And that played a role in why I got very public in my small circle, and how all of this exploded around me. It was because I was like, hey, I'm gaining weight, and it's because I don't have my period. And he's like, why I don't have my period? And I become very vocal about it.
Right.
And that was like, whatever, that was just my way of like mitigating how many people were wondering why I gained weight.
Because what are they not allowed to think of you in that case?
They're not allowed to think that I am not capable of being on a diet.
Right. Oh, and they're not allowed to think that you don't know that you're gaining weight either.
Yeah, good one. They're probably not allowed to know, to think that I played with this term recently of like, that I let myself go is one that comes up a lot.
Sure.
Now I'm in a place of like, yeah, bitches, I let myself go. And it's like so good, because
that's gotta be a hashtag or a t-shirt, by the way, like hashtag let myself go, or whatever the hypothalamic amenorrhea interpretation of that is. Like, yes, let yourself go. Absolutely. Why would you not want to?
I know. Well, I really contemplated that saying. Why the heck do people say that saying? What does that even mean? And I have this like theory that it came from originally a positive term that almost turned kind of like sarcastic. Once upon a time, I don't know, back when hippies were like a thing, I feel like, they were probably like, yeah, dude, like I let myself go, man.
Right.
I put all that shit behind me, and they were feeling great. People probably were like, oh, it's like they really just like let all of their stresses go, and they look so much happier. And then it eventually became like they really let themselves go.
Yeah, interestingly enough, like hippies were judged for not playing by the rules. And us letting ourselves go into hypothalamic amenorrhea recovery, that is us going, I'm not going to play by these rules anymore, guys. I got to play by the rules that my body is giving me. So there absolutely is something that's totally counterculture and hippie about this recovery process, that yes, letting ourselves go is the only answer.
Which is so polar opposite of the people that are tend to get.
I know. Because we are not counterculture. We are very rigid. We are products of the culture. So for us to risk going into counterculture territory, like this is why makes such interesting work for my coaching clients, is for them to go, yes, people are going to think I've let myself go, but there's a sense of they don't want to be cut off from the community. They don't want to be sent out of the tribe or excommunicated from the culture because they're not valuing the same value systems that of fitness and rigidity and caloric restriction and whatever the definitions of health that they happen to be ascribing to that week. So there's something really dangerous about going against the culture. That makes sense why there's so much fear attached to this. A lot of ways.
Yeah, it does. That's so much for everyone to just contemplate and to journal about and sit and think about. What are your reasons for this? What are you afraid of? There's so much. So speaking of your clients and everything people can walk away and do, where could people maybe find you? Or because I know that you might be a really good fit for a lot of people listening.
Sure. So my website is molliebirney.com, and my Instagram handle is MB Clinical Coaching. So that's M as in Mollie, B as in Bernie, Clinical Coaching. And so feel free to DM me or reach out via my website. Happy to talk more about what you're going through and if us working together would be a good fit.
Awesome. Mollie, thank you. That was such a good conversation. We talked over each other a million times.
Yeah, forgive me, but I think that's a good sign, that we're just a good fit.
Yeah, I just wanted to just keep it going. It was awesome. I can't thank you enough. I hope people reach out. I hope people like this episode, and yeah.
I love it. Dani, I love that you've taken this project on. I think it's such an important conversation to be having out there. And let's just let's just keep going with it. And I want to sign off with the fact that this is not a perfect process. It is absolutely a process, not an event. And just as much self-compassion as we can all fucking have for ourselves along the way, the better.
Well, if you have made it all the way to the end of this podcast, then you are in luck, because I'm going to chat to you a little bit about the waitlist for the HA Society. Have you joined it yet? This is a coming soon community for women with HA who have or who need a safe space. We're going to have message boards, community calls, and weekly sessions with mindfulness, yoga, meditation, relationship coaches, health coaches, nutritionists, everyone. There'll be opportunities for lessons and Q&As with those nutrition professionals and all the coaches. I'm currently working on this platform as we speak. So you can join the waitlist at, just type in thehasociety.com and you'll see the webpage. It'll have all of the details and you can join the waitlist there, or depending on when you're listening to this episode, it's already open and you can go there and join now. So right now it's the beta program, and that means there's going to be special pricing for the first few people. I'm going to be pricing it pretty low with the intention of eventually being able to charge more for it once we're up and running and all of the features are open inside of the membership. I also just wanted to say that I had no intention of starting this community. Originally, I just wanted to do a podcast, but when I saw the response from the women and the DMs that I get, please keep sending me your stories in the DMs. I love it when you reach out and share that kind of stuff with me. So I kept getting these responses for more support, and I really just couldn't ignore it anymore. And this podcast is just me talking, and I want to connect more with you guys. So making stuff online and facilitating conversations is a huge passion of mine. So this, intersects all of my biggest passions and my journey into one amazing thing: Hypothalamic Amenorrhea, the society. So again, go and join the waitlist at thehasociety.com, be a part of the beta group. And I am so excited to see you guys in there. Have a good day.
Hey, I'm Katie Grossman, a trail and ultramarathon runner sponsored by New Balance. I'm also a creative professional, wife to my life and running partner, Dominic, and a very proud mom of 2 girls. Life has gotten a little crazy, especially after battling postpartum injury and an abdominal tumor. But running is still a huge part of my identity, and it legitimately improves my mental health. I'm working my way back to racing, but for now, I'm still finding peace on the trail. Go be on the run at newbalance.com.
Check out the latest footwear innovation from Adidas, the Adizero Adios Pro 2, which features carbon fiber energy rods that are both lightweight and precisely tuned for a more anatomical transition. Everything from the ultra-light polyester upper to the re-sculpted midsole and the reinvented outsoles are designed for speed. Visit adidas.com to learn more today.